Can you guess the most consumed food in the world? If you guessed pizza, you're close but wrong. According to Caroline McClatchy's article in the BBC, the answer is pasta. All around the world, essentially everyone has had pasta at least at some point in their lives. Even so, it may be difficult to believe that pasta is the most consumed food in the world. So how did it reach such popularity? Well, while researching the topic of pasta, I discovered that the history of pasta is far more interesting than the modern widespread reasonings for consuming it today. Most people today eat pasta because of its accessibility, low cost, low maintenance, and the variations in dishes that can be made with it. But the fact that pasta is the most consumed food in the world is arguably the least interesting fact about it when considering its history consisting of pasta myths, pasta wars, and unexpected historical pasta facts. One of the most common fallacies in pasta history is that Marco Polo is the one who introduced pasta to the Italians. According to Kristen Conger from HowStuffWorks.com, quote, by the 9th century, Arab groups had expanded into Sicily and southern Italy, likely bringing along noodle-making techniques learned from their eastern neighbors, end quote, which has been deduced due to the fact that writings from Arab geographer Muhammad al-Idrisi date back to 1154, some 138 years before Polo traveled to Italy from China. Still, Polo claimed the credit. A second common myth about pasta is that Thomas Jefferson is the inventor of macaroni and cheese. Although Jefferson did visit France and northern Italy during his presidency, Jesse Rhodes' article, Marvelous Macaroni and Cheese in Smithsonian Magazine, notes that he became enamored of fashionable pasta dishes served there. He brought back noodles and a pasta machine, end quote, and later, quote, served mac and cheese at an 1802 state dinner, end quote. However, quote, the exact origin is unknown, though it most likely hails from Northern Europe, end quote. So even though Jefferson did not invent macaroni and cheese, he is credited with popularizing it. A third myth about pasta actually came from 1957 when the BBC aired a spoof documentary on April Fool's Day showing a Swiss family, quote, plucking strands of spaghetti from a tree and laying them in the sun to dry, end quote, according to their archives. The response in the rest of the day and in days following were that people were, quote, so intrigued they wanted to find out where they could purchase their very own spaghetti bush, end quote. Although myths about pasta are tangled, the sauce is in Pasta Wars. In 1987, the LA Times received permission to publish part of Julia Delacroix's book, Pasta Classica, The Art of Italian Pasta Cooking, which discusses how in the mid to late 1400s, as pasta's popularity rose, so did the number of its critics. She focuses specifically on Florentine monk Girolamo Savonarola, who she refers to as a, quote, religious fanatic, end quote, that, quote, shouted from his pulpit, it's not enough for you to eat your pasta fried. No, you think you have to add garlic to it, and when you eat ravioli, it's not enough to boil it in a pot and eat it in its juice. You have to fry it in another pan and cover it with cheese, end quote. The response of the Italians displayed the effectiveness of Savonarola's rhetoric as they, quote, eventually fried Savonarola himself at the stake. In Corby Kummer's article, Pasta in the Atlantic, he discusses how in 1975, the EEC, or European Economic Community, decided to place pasta subsidies in order to, quote, allow Italians to compete with American makers on inexpensive pasta, not just fancy brands, end quote. In 1985, 10 years later, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative would, quote, impose 40% tariff on European pasta without egg and a 25% tariff on pasta with egg to go into effect at the end of October that year, end quote. The response of the EEC was to increase their pasta subsidy by 176% in months July through October of that year. Kummer goes on to say that The quote, American tariff has caused a furor in Italy which sees itself as penalized for a problem that has nothing to do with, end quote. Although pasta wars are interesting and humorous, the unexpected historical facts will send you through a twirl. Julia Delacroix's excerpt in the LA Times discusses how in early pasta making, the work was so laborious that men had to knead the dough with their feet for hours on end a day, which led to, quote, the King of Naples, Ferdinand II, who reigned from 1830 to 1859, tried to modernize by hiring a famous engineer to design a new, more hygienic system. The result was a mechanical man with bronze feet, end quote. A second unexpected historical fact is that tomatoes were not incorporated into pasta until 1839. This has to do with, quote, rumors of tomatoes being poisonous continued in parts of Europe and its colonies until the mid-19th century, end quote, from Justin Dimitri's article, A History of Pasta. Kummer's article in The Atlantic talks about how, quote, from 1880 to 1921, more than 5 million Italians moved to America, end quote, and that, quote, doctors complained that Italians would not enter hospitals because they considered the food inedible, end quote, which is probably still true today. The least interesting fact of pasta is that it's the most consumed food in the world, because when you consider the craziness of the history, the pasta myths, the pasta wars, and all of these unexpected facts, you see that, you know, which vitamins you get per serving are boring in comparison. The pasta myths show the different origin stories, Italian origin, American origin, and where the dish literally came from, bush or kitchen. The pasta wars and facts show the Italians' refusal to let go and their determination to make the dish better. Pasta flourishes today because of its winding history that kept the dish alive, making it more interesting than the health benefits that people focus on today. Pasta la vista.